years ago, my partner and I bought our first home. A quiet little street, semi-detached houses, well-trimmed hedges, the kind of place where nothing ever happens. 18 months later, the house next door went up for sale. Bigger, driveway, garage. It felt like progress. So we bought it, and we sold our old place, the one directly beside us. A Polish couple moved in. They were polite, reserved. They only spoke English to us, never Dutch like the rest of the street. At the time, it felt like a language barrier. Now, it feels deliberate. The disturbances began slowly, heavy impacts against the shared wall. Late at night, not accidental sounds, not DIY, more like something or someone being thrown. Then silence. Some nights it was deafening music at 2 or 3 a.m. Other nights, nothing at all. The unpredictability was the worst part. You couldn't relax, you couldn't settle. You felt watched, measured. One afternoon, the husband returned with his car destroyed on both sides, metal torn, paint ripped. He laughed it off. Concrete pole on one side, trailer on the other. It didn't add up, but we ignored it, because ignoring things is easier. Then came the break-in. Around 6 p.m., he rang us in a panic, said men were outside turning his security cameras away, begged us to look. We checked. 2 men were there, calm, controlled, not rushed. We called the police. 20 minutes later they arrived. The men were gone. Nothing had been stolen. Later we reviewed our doorbell footage. One of the men stood outside beforehand, speaking in Polish, discussing which house to target. They weren't casing the street, they were coordinating. I told the police it felt staged. No follow-up, no updates. A week passed, then it escalated. I was out when my partner rang me. His voice was different, not annoyed, afraid. The neighbor's car had just driven straight through our front garden. No braking, no hesitation, straight into their own front door. 2 men got out. They began loading high-end electronics into the vehicle. Large televisions, professional speakers, equipment worth thousands. It wasn't frantic, it was organized. Police arrived within 7 minutes. They caught the men at the car. No ID, no explanation. Then one of them calmly claimed to be our neighbor, using his full name. There was just one problem. In 9 months, our neighbor had never spoken Dutch. This man spoke it fluently, with a thick Polish accent. The lie collapsed instantly. They tried to flee. A violent chase followed through our otherwise silent residential streets. They were arrested, but officers could still hear movement inside the house. They went back in and pulled out a 3rd man. As we stood inside with police assessing the damage to our garden, our doorbell rang. We turned and saw him, the real neighbor. His face was barely recognizable, one eye swollen shut, lip split open, blood dried across his chin. His arm hung loosely, marked with defensive wounds. He looked less like a victim and more like someone who had survived something he wouldn't explain. The officer asked questions. He refused to cooperate, refused medical help at first, refused to give names. Later that night, he came back, shaking. He admitted he'd been unfaithful, said his wife had sent men to deal with him, asked if he could stay with us. We said no. We locked our doors. At 1 a.m., our dog began growling. That low, deliberate growl, the one that means someone is there. We checked the camera. He was back, standing on our porch, ringing again and again. We didn't answer. Then headlights turned onto our street. He panicked. He crouched behind our cars, hiding in the shadows of our own driveway. Watching a bloodied man conceal himself meters from your front door changes the way you feel about safety. The car stopped. His wife stepped out. She walked towards her house, then stopped. She had seen him under the streetlight. She began making a sound I will never forget. Not crying, wailing, low, animalistic, broken. He said nothing. After several minutes, they both got into the car and left. We didn't see him again. 3 days later, she returned alone, collected their dog, told us quietly she didn't believe she would ever see her husband again. No police updates, no closure, just an empty house next door. Sometimes I still think about it, how close we were to whatever was happening inside those walls. Drugs, debt, organized crime, domestic violence. I don't know, and I don't think I want to, because the most unsettling part is realizing it wasn't a random Dreadborne. It was planned, coordinated, and happening just inches from where we slept, on a street where nothing ever happens. For years, I thought it was my imagination. That's the scariest part, because when you convince yourself you're safe, you stop looking for danger. This started in 2017. We had just moved into a split-level house in the suburbs of Montreal, Canada. Quiet neighborhood, wide back gardens, the type of place where parents say, "Nothing bad happens here." My bedroom sat at ground level, not quite basement, not quite main floor, right in between. One wall backed onto the garage, the other had a large window facing the backyard. The blinds were old plastic vertical panels. Several were missing. Even when fully closed, there were gaps. Across from my bed stood my wardrobe, large sliding mirror doors. So no matter which way I faced in bed, I could always see my window reflected behind me. I was 15 when it started. I used to stay up late watching YouTube on my tablet. Most nights I struggled to sleep, so I'd leave the window slightly open for air. One night, I heard something outside, a soft shuffling sound. I paused the video. The sound stopped. I told myself it must have been part of what I was watching, so I pressed play again. The shuffling came back, slow, measured. I looked at the window directly. Nothing. Eventually, I fell asleep. A few nights passed. Then it happened again. This time, I listened longer. I could swear I heard breathing. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. I looked at the window again. Nothing. So I turned to face my wardrobe instead. And that's when I saw it. Through the narrow gap in the blinds, reflected in the mirror, something moved. A shadow shifting. A silhouette where there shouldn't be one. A cold wave rushed through my body. I ran upstairs and woke my parents. My dad went outside to check, walked the entire garden, checked the gate, looked behind the shed. Nothing. He told me if someone had entered, he would have heard the squeaky gate. Said I needed to stop watching scary videos before bed. I believed him, because believing him meant I was safe. The noises continued. Not every night, not even every week, just often enough to remind me. Footsteps, shuffling, breathing, always after 11 p.m. I started avoiding looking at the window altogether. Even the mirror made me uncomfortable. Winter came. Snow covered the garden. The noises stopped. I convinced myself it had all been stress. Then spring returned, and so did the sounds. One night, I forced myself to look, not at the window directly, at the mirror, and I saw it clearly this time, the outline of a person, standing still, watching. I ran upstairs again. My dad checked again. Nothing. No footprints, no movement on the camera, no evidence. And once again, I let myself believe it wasn't real. Years passed like that, until December 2021. There was a severe windstorm that night. I was watching something with my boyfriend over Discord when I went to get water around 11:30 p.m. My parents were sitting in the living room, unusually quiet, tense. Then red and blue lights flashed outside. A police car pulled into our driveway. My parents rushed me back to my room. 2 minutes later, they called me upstairs. My dad looked different. Not dismissive, not calm, serious. He told me that about 20 minutes earlier, during the storm, he stepped into the backyard to check if anything had blown over. That's when he saw it. The light from my bedroom window was illuminating part of the garden, and standing in that light was a man, motionless, facing my window, staring inside. My dad shouted. The man turned immediately and ran. He didn't fumble. He didn't hesitate. He jumped the back fence effortlessly, like he'd done it before, and disappeared into the neighboring gardens. In that moment, every sound I had ignored became real. Every breath I had imagined wasn't imagined. Someone had been standing outside my window for years. The police couldn't do much. My dad hadn't seen his face clearly. The neighbor behind us refused to open her door when my parents tried to warn her. She yelled that she'd call the police if they didn't leave. That reaction still unsettles me. Did she know him? Had she seen him before? Or had she mistaken my parents for him? We installed more cameras after that night. The noises stopped completely, which somehow felt worse, because it meant he knew he'd been seen. I moved rooms. Mine now faces the street, but I still struggle to sleep near open windows. What terrifies me most isn't that someone watched me. It's how long he did it, how many nights he stood there, how many times he saw me change clothes, sleep, talk on the phone, how close he was, and how easily it could have escalated. Sometimes the real horror isn't a ghost, it's a person, standing silently in the dark, just beyond the glass. The most terrifying part wasn't that someone broke into our house. It was that they never really left. I was 15 when my family moved into a larger house in Alberta. We had been living in a small apartment before that, but with my little sister on the way, we needed more space. The house was cheap, too cheap. It wasn't in the best area, and it definitely needed work. But my parents saw potential. Most of the renovation focused on the basement. New carpet, reinforced beams, fresh wallpaper. I even chose the pattern myself. That basement became my room. For the first few months, everything felt normal, until the night we came home and found our front door wide open. We had been out celebrating my dad's birthday. When we pulled into the driveway, the door was just standing there, unlocked, slightly swaying. My mom panicked immediately. She made us stay in the car while my dad grabbed a heavy wrench from his truck and went inside. We called the police. Those 5 minutes waiting felt endless. The police searched the house. Nothing stolen, no forced entry, no one inside. But things had been moved. Books knocked off my shelf, small items slightly out of place, just enough to feel wrong. After that night, the noises started. My bedroom was in the basement, and old houses make old house sounds. Pipes, wood settling, heating ticking. So when I heard strange thuds from inside the walls, I ignored them, until one night around 2 a.m., I was under my blanket playing my Nintendo DS with the volume off. That's when I heard it. Clear laughter, not loud, not echoing, but close, too close. It came from the wall right beside my bed. I froze, every muscle locked. I waited. 30 minutes passed. Nothing else happened. Eventually, I convinced myself it had been my imagination, sleep deprivation, stress. But the sounds continued over the next few weeks. Soft movement, scratching, shifts in the wall. Then my sister was born, and because the basement was large enough, she shared the room with me. My mom trusted me to look after her at night. There were baby monitors in the living room and kitchen. One night, my parents went out for dinner. I stayed home with my sister. Everything was normal, until I walked into the kitchen to grab a snack. The baby monitor crackled. Then I heard it. Heavy footsteps, downstairs, in my room. My stomach dropped. My sister began crying. Through the speaker, I heard a faint shh, followed by a loud crash. Without thinking, I ran to bedroom and grabbed my dad's rifle. It had a trigger lock, no ammunition. But in that moment I didn't care. I just needed something in my hands. I held it like it was loaded and walked toward the basement door. Slowly, quietly, I opened it, stepped down one stair at a time. My sister was crying in her crib. The baby monitor was knocked onto its side, but there was no one there. I grabbed her immediately and ran upstairs. I shoved a chair under the basement door handle and called my parents. They called the police. Officers arrived quickly. They searched the house. Nothing. Just as they were about to leave, my dad hesitated. Then he asked them something strange. "Did you check behind the bookshelf?" In my basement room, I had a built-in bookshelf. It looked fixed into the wall, but it wasn't. When the officer pushed it slightly, it moved, like a door. Behind it was a small hidden space between the walls, exposed pipes, dusty beams, and on the floor, food wrappers, one of our missing cups, a bottle of lotion, a switchblade, and a half-eaten apple that was still fresh. Someone had been living inside our house. The officer said while they were outside talking to us earlier, whoever it was likely escaped through the basement window. The window was open, my desk chair placed neatly underneath it. They had an exit plan. They had been comfortable. After the police left, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A few days later, when no one was home, I pushed the bookshelf open myself. I needed to see it again. I searched every corner. That's when I found it. A tiny hole in the wall, perfectly positioned. I bent down and looked through. It pointed directly at my bed, at my dresser, at the space where I changed clothes, slept, played games, talked to friends. Whoever had been inside that wall had been watching me, not just that night, for weeks, maybe months. The laughter I heard, the breathing, the movement. It wasn't pipes, it was a person. I'm an adult now. I live in my own apartment, but my parents still live in that house. 5 years later, sometimes I lie awake at night thinking about that hidden space, about how close that person was to us, to my baby sister. What would have happened if I hadn't gone upstairs that night? If I had ignored the monitor? The police told us they didn't think he would return, because now we knew. But the truth is, we only found him because he made a mistake, and I still wonder how long he had been there before we ever noticed. Sometime. The safest place in your life is just a wall away from someone watching you.